automatically economy pick going down, but alternate pick going up.
Okay, right. Fierce and the Dead YouTube channel. I'm here with Michael Woodman, and we're going to talk about your solo record. Why a solo record now? I suppose that's the question.
Well, I mean, to some extent, that's going to be... It's that weird thing of lockdown when it all kind of started, and... There's a lot of solo albums, and suddenly your entire Facebook feed is adverts of people going, "I made some music. I sang about my pain during lockdown." So to some extent, it's. Well, to be honest, no. These are bits and pieces that have been hanging around for a while. Usually, the music has a long gestation period, to a point where I suddenly look at the date ident on a piece of music I've written, and I go, oh my God, I'll be dead soon. I must do something. So it's terrible, fear of mortality, I think, is why a solo album now, because, and I think, it was just answering I think the Thumpermonkey process is a very democratic process, and it's great. We'll all come with ideas. We'll all sometimes come with complete songs. We'll chuck stuff back and forth. And it's kind of like this process of back and forth of stuff being kind of fiddled around with and changed, and actually it's very comfortable. And it's interesting. I know I'm already going off on a tangent, but I know that one of the things that I think has been difficult for you guys has been working remotely and sending files to each other and stuff like that. And I have to say, I love sending files back and forth because I'm pretty anxious in a jamming situation. I deliberately surround myself with musicians that I think are better than I am, to keep myself on my toes. And I actually, but as I've gotten older, I found that, and I'm not saying I don't like jamming, but I find that I'm more productive when I can kind of just sit in a darkened room or in my shed and listen to stuff and just come up with stuff and let stuff occur to me, I suppose. So, I have gone on a big tangent now, and I'm trying to remember back to my train of thought.
Do you find though that I've found through lockdown doing stuff for sending files around, and do you get a bit forensic with the music though? Do you find yourself taking things apart too much and then overanalyzing it?
I don't know. I mean, that's the Thumpermonkey process. So
Thumpermonkey stuff is that written as a band then, or is just
typically Rail will write something, or Ben will write something, or or one of us will write something, and it will be largely complete, and then it will go around, and then we'll kind of think about it and let it settle, and then either people are into it or they're not, and this kind of process goes on and on and on, and then eventually we kind of get an aggregation of stuff that we're all pretty into. Then somebody will tear it to pieces and put other stuff on it and change it around a bit, and then I'll start putting some vocal melodies down on it, and we bounce stuff back and forth. And for me, I really like that way of working, because I've got that control in my own space, and it's like getting a present through the email where somebody's taken that kind of game of musical consequences, I suppose. So for me, I find that I get more interesting ideas from doing that, I suppose. So when you say it's a forensic process, I mean, I guess so. I mean, I don't think that. Go on.
Obviously, I've been watching. Hello, cat. The cat's here. Watching you guys, over the course of the last, probably 12 years since I first heard the early stuff you're working on. I mean, how long's Thumpermonkey been going now? 2005?
20 years now.
Yeah.
Well, if you're counting me in my pants with a cracked copy of Reason, with a guitar plugged into the headphone microphone jack with no processing and just like a Marshall stomp pedal or something, then like 2001 or something like that when I first started messing around. But when actual humans were involved, 2005, 2006.
Because I think I've heard you reasonably early on. And there's been a evolution of what you've been doing. You know, I think you've got a lot more confidence as a vocalist. I mean,
I have, I don't think I was a good vocalist in the early days. I think I was trying to be a rock. I think I was trying to do rock shouting, and I don't think my voice is appropriate for rock shouting.
Well, I don't know, because you got to Easy Boy, and I thought that's such a great record. I mean, that was like the sort of peak of Thumpermonkey rock, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and then and then after that, you sort of kind of the keyboard started to come in. It became but I think Thumpermonkey, that the Wheezy Boy track, I think that was the, you know, in terms of our lot, you know, the people involved in the sort of funny music scene, I think that track bloody brilliant, and that was that's a bit of a, you know, high point in that scene, as it were. But you sort of went off on a tangent after that, didn't you? So the keyboards came in, you went more sort of not necessarily experimental, but sort of more linear passages and sort of it's very really interesting songwriting ideas and stuff. But listening to the solo record, I can see it's kind of evolved from the last Thumpermonkey stuff. There's evolutions of the stuff you're doing with the linear melody stuff, and there's the new. But with the newer stuff, it seems like there's more minimalist arrangements. But vocally, it's a real continuation of what you were doing previously. Okay. Would you say that was the thing?
I'd say that's true. I think there's been a desire to. I don't know. I mean, I look back at the early Thumpermonkey stuff, and you know, you do what you do at the time that you do it. Certainly around about 2009, I think there's great music on the stuff that we were releasing then, but there is a bit more of that influence of all the kind of pattern bungle, you know, where there's an element of wry humor kind of going through it, and there's a sense of that pluralism of kind of, oh, we're going to do a jazz bit now we're going to do a kind of a rock bit, and that's fine, and that's all well and good. And then it turns into the kind of the Make Me Young, etc. Thumpermonkey, where it's got more of a symphonic aspect to it, and I suppose just thinking about it, I think the simplicity in the arrangements, or the relative simplicity in the arrangements, is kind of largely geared towards the fact that what I want to be doing, and hopefully what I want to be doing quite soon, is, you know, maybe even before getting out and playing some shows, is trying to do some live streams of just me, and it needs to be stuff that I can pick up a guitar. And I can take, I'm looking for a new pedal I bought, but I don't know where it is at the moment. I can take the silly little looper pedal I bought and kind of construct some stuff and do those kinds of things. So
you can hear on the solo stuff that, like I said, I've only heard the record once. So I mean, hearing it through once, the arrangement will work really, really well with the looper. I think.
I think so. I'm just getting. I find that quite, because you've obviously, you know, given your Twitter handle, you've got a history of looping. But the thing I'm still, you know, and I don't know if you felt this the first time around, hitting the bloody thing with your foot at the right time, so it isn't an awkward, just slightly cut off, you know. And I'm sure with more, I got one of those Ditto Plus things. I don't know if you've come across that at all.
Yeah, I have had the Ditto Plus. I had quite a few of it, but I kind of found that the action on different loopers kind of it becomes sort of micro looping, and I mean, it's the sort of thing you've got to do. I got really good at it at one point, because I was doing, like, you know, I think I did like 40 gigs a year, and I was doing things like, and even when it went wrong, it went right, if you know what I mean. I got into a position where I got so confident with it. However, I don't think it would take me a year to get back to that level again now. So
that's
it's not
great.
That,
okay. Yeah. maybe I should just play some songs and not worry about it.
But I mean, you know, it's I don't know. But Carvis has done it recently. He sort of picked it up.
I saw him live doing it recently. Yeah, yes, I did. I went to. I don't know if you were at that show, the one that he did in a library around East London, I think, where it looks like a mini version of the Guggenheim. It's quite a startling space. It was and he was using his looper then, and that was great.
I went to the one in a basement in East London. So I can't remember what it was, but I saw him there.
Right,
it was really, really cool. He was doing the harmonium stuff as well. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So I think it would work really well. But yeah, I was really impressed with it. And like, although arrangements are quite minimalist. Some really interesting stuff. So you got John from Cleft on drums, haven't you?
I have. And so John, obviously, John has been doing bits and pieces for us for a while. He recorded a live version of Waitley up in Sheffield when we played with Awooga, which is great. And he obviously we played with Cleft. With Thumpermonkey in the past as well, so that's where we primarily know him from. He recorded the Thumpermonkey live album as well, which is fantastic. And he invited me to do his song in a day thing, where I went up to Manchester and sang some nonsense in a day and came up with a song that I quite like. So that was, and I think it's just, with lockdown happening when it did, it was kind of, I think it's a strange situation, isn't it, where you have something like that happening, and I think I've said this to a few people. It's an article that I read, and I really agree with it. That awful pressure you suddenly feel under, where it's like, oh well, it's lockdown now. What the internet says you should do is obviously show your creativity, because if you don't, then you're wasting it. So you've got this negative self-image that you're kind of bringing in on yourself to go along with the crushing disappointment of the fact that there's an apocalypse, and it's like, give yourself a break. Now, luckily, I didn't have that. I was like, okay, I'm actually going to get down and do it. So I started working with John, and the process was basically program drums to a variable click. So I was kind of ramping the speed up and down to try and give it a bit of humanity. Sending that to John swearing at me, John then playing along to the click and interpreting those drums, sending them back to me. Then I'd record all my guitar parts, but I'd record those through amp simulators to get the demo down. But then he would reamp those to his stinky old boutique Selma amps, and he'd record the bass parts that either I played or Sam Warren of Guapo and Thumpermonkey fame performed. Then Josh Pearl would put a load of crazy saxophone arrangements over the top of it. I'd send a load of programming, and I'd do all the vocals basically through one of these at home, and all that goes to John, and then he mixes everything. So it's a weird thing where you're starting off trying to think of creating a project where I don't know, when I think about it, when people are asking me for input onto the artwork, and it's like, well, what's it about, what's the feel of it, I'm kind of going, oh, like storm fronts over wet stone and burning buildings in the woods and weird creatures with massively dilated pupils hiding under the leaves, and very impressionistic folk horror nonsense, I guess is what I was, stuff like that. Go on, sorry.
Because it sounds phenomenal. It sounds really lively.
That's John.
Sounds really good. I mean, the vocals, like I say, your vocal sounds really, really strong on this one.
I did actually. It's towards the end of this time where I actually thought, because I suppose I write difficult vocal parts, and I didn't really concentrate on how to sing. So I take that, what you've said about gaining confidence as a vocalist is absolutely true. I'd write these things, and maybe you can do it in the studio, but trying to do that stuff live was a source of some anxiety. So
obviously, I've seen you play a lot of times, and I've seen you doing the vocal stuff live, and I'm just like, it's like you constructed this sort of hellish prison.
I know, yeah, exactly. Some of the interval jumps are a bit stupid.
It's
but luckily,
great, but
I think it was only within the last 18 months that I actually started going and getting singing lessons. Luckily, with and I must do a shout out to Chiara Ditrana, Singing Out Loud, who lives 2 doors down from me, so it was great. I was able to just literally go out and get some pointers to her from her about technique, and even with a relatively short amount of time, there's some fundamentals that you just don't consider that when you start applying them kind of make a huge amount of difference. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. It's obvious, because I had formal guitar tuition, but just assuming that you can do the ridiculous things I write just by trying it.
They are really hard. I mean, some of the sort of, aside from Mike Patton's hardest sort of vocal parts I've ever heard, sort of it's like, I mean, it sounds great, but God, that must be just doing it live.
Yeah. One of the best,
played loads of times. But
one of the best things I bought for practice is something called a belt box, which is basically it's like a Hannibal Lecter mask. So it is a vocal mute, which means you can sing at volume at home, but you won't irritate the neighbours. So it is a hilarious thing, and you just strap it to your face when you're performing. But it means that you can, because I think if you don't have that constant practice, then you just risk forcing your voice, and it's getting that point at which you're getting maximum value for the minimum amount of kind of input, I suppose, and realizing that you can sing with a certain volume by changing the muscle groupings in your throat. And I don't really, I still feel very much like a student in this context, but there is some fundamental technique that Chiara was able to point me towards that certainly made a big difference.
Listening to this record, so you can hear like Scott Walker, you can hear bits of proggy sort of stuff, but what would you say were your influences for this album? And sort of really, I've never really talked to you about this. I mean, I know we've talked about Faith No More and Mr. Bungle and stuff in the past, but
this is trying to do different, and I think Scott Walker's always going to be. Yeah, I mean, Tilt was an interesting one because that's an album. I mean, I don't know how much you're into the difficult period of. Yeah, Tilt is one of those ones that you only want to listen to that album once a year. But when you do, you have a kind of spiritual experience if you're into that kind of thing, I suppose. And I think that Tilt album took me a long time to get into, but I just kind of kept coming back to it. And it's that weird mixture of kind of just, I don't know. I mean, I understand that some people, a lot of people would be kind of like, why would you listen to something which is so much about, it's a horror movie in many respects in auditory form with unformed nightmarish fever dream lyrics that are just kind of, seems to be a diary of being anxious really. But there's a vulnerability, especially in his voice as he got older, and something numinous about that. Is that the right word? I can't even remember what that means. I'm trying to be clever and use a long word there. There's something about his voice which is really good, I think, in the context of that album. And it's and certainly that's a huge inspiration. And there's a particular emotional space. You get older and you get jaded and you listen to a lot of music, and then there's something where you suddenly feel like you're a lot young, when you listen to it when you're really young. Totally. And it kind of that allowed me to access that. So I guess those kind of, there's a theatre to it, but there's a subtlety to it as well.
It's not naff. There's I think because it's genuine and emotional, and it's like, there is I suppose an element of contrivance, but I suppose
it's awkward. It is awkward. It is awkward to listen to. I remember Alison Goldfrapp talking about it, and there's an element of listening to it and feeling like uncomfortable. There's an awkwardness about the delivery and how vulnerable he's making himself while he's doing that kind of stuff, and that was really interesting to me, I suppose. So Scott Walker, I guess. Steve Inman, don't you, of Pig Shackle? Yeah. Steve played me. I mean, I'd heard the KO Dot album, the very very first one, Choirs of the Eye, and again, I like the mixture of sludgy riff and Jeff Buckley. That appeals to me, and that's the kind of the type. That's the KO Dot I like. But I remember Steve played me the Coyote album, which again is pretty theatrical, and it's got kind of very 80s production on it, and there's a Cocteau Twins kind of feel to it, and they citing Scott Walker as an influence as well. And 90% of people might think it's ridiculous, but again, there was an emotional resonance with that album, which really appealed to me. There's a Canadian musician as well called Martin Tielli from a band called the Rio Statics, which is pretty deep cut kind of thing. But there's an acoustic album he did, which I'm forgetting the name of, which I've not listened to in a long time. He's got an amazing voice, actually, and he's a fantastic acoustic guitar player. I think it's something like Nobody Knew He Was the Poppy Salesman or something like that. If you Google those words randomly, you'll find the album. But I think there's a lot of his stuff that has a real intimacy that was probably, I'd say, would be influential as well.
And sort of because the vocals are really up front on the record, aren't they? And a lot of people, that's one of the hardest things to do, is to have the vocal that sort of up front. And
I guess so. I mean, I give responsibility to other people for that stuff because I can't mix.
Because every time I hear a vocalist mix their own album, the vocals are always too quiet.
The early Thumpermonkey stuff, my voice is going through a distortion pedal, and it's really low in the mix because I'm really embarrassed.
I think, but when I first heard Wheezy Boy, I thought, oh, bloody hell, someone's done something. And I think, when someone ups the game a bit, I was like, oh, okay. It was like it was one of those tracks, and it was just great to hear your vocal that strong on that. It's really impressive.
I think you've got to just got to do it. Really, I think you can bury your vocals for effect sometimes, but normally why I'm burying the vocals in my mixes is because I'm actually not that confident about the material when you're trying to construct something textural where actually the vocals need to be up the front.
So going back, talking more about the early stuff you did. What were your influences early on? So we talk about bungle and stuff, cardiacs.
Absolutely, yeah, that kind of stuff. Certainly bungle. I mean, certainly the pattern stuff. I mean, I was the ultimate awkward pattern. I was in California in 1999 when California was released, and I went down to Santa Cruz, where they filmed The Lost Boys. It's it's Santa Carla from The Lost Boys, and bungle were playing a show there, supported by Dillinger Escape Plan, and that's when they were doing the Aphex Twin covers together as well. And I went and tried to have an awkward conversation with Mike Patton, and it was terrible. It was just it was just horrendous, So, but sorry, Mike.
I suppose he's one of those guys one of the things is he's been doing it quite some time now. We've been doing it. I think one of those things is to continue to evolve and do things that are interesting, and Mike Patton's one of those guys, isn't he? And Scott Walker's another one where they've continued to make interesting records, and that's all we can hope for. You talked about earlier doing some live streams. Is that something? Isn't that one of the next things you've got planned?
I'd like to. I mean, I need to. The reason I'm kind of place it in those terms is because I had a rather unwelcome interruption halfway through the recording of the album. So basically, I've had trouble with my hearing.
How's that going now?
Great. No, it's all right. Spoiler alert, it's got a really positive ending before I go into this misery, gloom kind of thing. So this is an endorsement of current surgical procedures, and a slight trigger warning if you don't want to hear someone talking about complex mechanical procedures inside your head. But
I've had bladder cancer, so
yes,
of
course.
I can do really horrific stories.
I'm thinking about your audience here, but still.
Go.
So basically, I've had a perforated eardrum for I don't know about 7-8 years, which is mostly scar tissue, and it wasn't going to heal basically. So I had constant ear infections, which just meant that the right eardrum was a bit of a mess. My hearing was kind of shot there anyway, but it was reasonably stable. But then I just kept on getting ear infections, and unfortunately, just as lockdown happened, it turned into a chronic ear disease, which meant that unless I had a surgical procedure carried out, I was going to lose my hearing. So it was fairly significant. Now, I really want to not be that person who talks about the potential side effects of an operation to put people off having this operation because they're minor, but more to illustrate the fact that there is a choice you're making here, because the really, really low chance of what can happen with this operation, where they're basically building me a new eardrum, is that you lose your hearing completely, you lose your balance, you lose your ability to taste because they're going really close to the nerves. That's a really low percentage chance. Okay, so I want to qualify that, but obviously I was a bit wobbly doing that. But what they ended up doing was taking fibrous material from behind my neck, my eardrum, my ear, cutting away the diseased part of my eardrum, going behind that and rebuilding the bone that connects to my eardrum that allows vibration to travel through to my inner ear. Okay, ludicrous levels of skill going on here. So that then you've got like a new bone touching the eardrum. Then they basically kind of cut like a bucket lid of skin off the side of the ear canal that goes down over the eardrum, and they put a graft underneath it so it all holds it in place. Then they fill your inner ear and your ear canal with this liquid dressing, which holds all of this delicate mechanical stuff together, and then that turns into an eardrum. Absolutely insane.
And it works fine now.
It was never going to be an operation that improved my hearing, but it was going to be an operation that stopped the disease getting worse. Now I'm going to have to wait until October before I know whether it's definitely cured. But my hearing's back to where it was before I had the operation done. It wasn't pleasant. The recovery was pretty difficult, but I was able to finish the record. So Yeah, not
I'm
ideal, but
it's it's on the mend though. I know
amazing what they're able to do these days. I mean, so here's to my ear surgeon.
yeah, just incredible, just absolutely incredible. And I mean, it's always the musician's nightmare, isn't it? That you lose your hearing. That's always the scariest thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Have you got tinnitus as well?
Not so much. I mean, my tinnitus mainly comes with stress, but actually, it's all right. My hearing I've got a lot of high frequency loss in my right ear, so basically, I think I've just got myself into the headspace where I don't trust myself to get good guitar tones to kind of mix stuff, and that's fine. I think if I hadn't, excuse me, that's the left. If I hadn't outsourced some, quite a lot of creative decisions to someone like John, who I really trusted, then, I think at the beginning of the project, I was just going around in circles, second guessing everything that I was doing.
I've seen the problem.
Although it's a solo project, you kind of have to get other people involved so that you don't go, so you don't go insane.
Because I just think as well, there's always that, like I say, you're not necessarily the best person to pick out the best parts, are you? Because John's done a phenomenal job. I didn't realise he was good. It's brilliant what he's done.
John's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't
know he was that good. It's really, really good.
Well, it's it's an ideal situation. He's a man who is really good at mixing and producing, who has a basement with his drum kit in it, and he's also reasonably quite good with the cutlery, shall we say?
Yeah,
yeah. So great work. So
it's coming out on Believer's Roast.
That's correct.
What's the release date for it?
It is August the 6th, I believe. So it's a little while away.
Do you want to talk about Carvis as well and Believer's Roast and how you ended up releasing?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, you and I have known Carvis for years. I think it was Matthew Rosick who used to run nights down at the Unicorn in North London, and I think Matthew put us on a bill with Knife Weld around about the time that Carvis was doing his Roast Fest compilation, or just before.
Yeah, we played that. I played that as well.
Well, Wheezy Boy. There's an early mix of Wheezy Boy on that compilation before it actually came out. Yeah. So basically, we've known him for years.
Live gigs as well. So you're going to do some solo shows as well?
I hope so. I mean, Carvis and I have talked about doing some stuff together, so hopefully that will appear. Yeah, that
would have worked really well, because you could do a load of gigs, just get in a car and do it, and just without having to have. Yeah, get the driving in. And Thumpermonkey's live stuff, is that you do an Arc Tangent with if it happens?
I really hope it goes ahead. I mean, it's on the cards. Yeah. Well, I mean, and obviously Arc Tangent, all of the stuff on their website, it's all going ahead, and they're super positive about it, and I really hope it goes ahead. I mean, it feels promising, really, the way things are going at the moment. I've had my first vaccine on Friday just passed, so I'm just kind of getting over that. And luckily, I will have my second vaccine booked exactly a month before Arc Tangent, so it's absolutely perfect timing as far as that's concerned. So
I think you go down. We played Arc Tangent about 6 years ago. It was really good for us. I think you guys would probably be more. I think they'd like you more than us.
I hope so. No, that came out wrong. I don't. Well, I'd hope so. Jesus.
I think they'd like what you do, because it's more. I think you're more Arc Tangent than we are.
Really?
I think. I think because you're slightly mathier in terms of slightly more angular than we are. And I think we played when we were going through a stage of playing stoner rock riffs, which kind of worked.
I'd have thought that Fierce and the Dead was more of an Arc Tangent band, because I think there is that element of it, and I don't know whether I'm conflating it with like Supersonic and stuff like that, which definitely had that element of kind of stoner rock riffs and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's slightly less stonery. I mean, I really enjoyed playing.
More clean tone tapping.
There's a lot of clean tone tapping.
I haven't listened to a lot of that sort of stuff, in the sense that I kind of, in my day, tapping was a linear melodic thing that you did, where you did your 8-finger tapping, and you watched your Marty Friedman instructional videos, and you'd like it. Whereas now it's much more, in some senses, it feels like it's much more of a, we're just going to treat the guitar in a more of a Stanley Jordan kind of, this is an instrument I'm playing like a piano.
Did you go through a Whittle rock phase with the Vinnie Moore? Yeah,
I did.
Me and Carl was talking about Vinnie Moore, and we had a similar
Shrapnel records being posted to me. I distinctly remember practicing Dream Theater guitar solos and annoying. So very much all the shred stuff, and I've got this really weird technique where I play a lot of guitar solos when I'm not in bands, but no one sees me doing it. Maybe
it's a private thing, isn't it?
It's private. It's best that way, I think.
But I'm not allowed to do it either.
But it's weird. It's like you spend so much time, there's a time where you'd get your sweep picking going really well.
Yeah.
You'd get your, and I was thinking about it today. It's this ridiculous thing where I'd watch those Frank Gambale instructional videos. Do you remember him? About his economy picking technique where you're trying to do 3 notes per string. And then you're doing it so that the pick falls onto the next string to reduce the amount of right hand movement. So what you end up doing is locking yourself into an absolutely pointless way of playing scales because it forces you to group your melodies 3 notes per string, which means they're totally, they're totally synthetic. The technique's dictating the melody, and I automatically economy pick going down, but alternate pick going up. Because I got bored practicing it, and now when I go down notes, it's economy picking. But when I'm going up, and it's an absolute mess, So I just don't.
My technique's awful. I mean, because I went through stages. I'd get into a guitar, I'd get into like Alan Holdsworth or John McLaughlin or something like that, and I'd learn it, but I wouldn't learn it properly. I'd sort of have half of it down, and then I'd move on to learning something else because I'd get bored. Yeah. So it's like I just didn't have the dedication. But then you hear people are just clones of other players, and because I was too lazy to learn how to play like anyone else.
I think it's for the best because you go through that period of practicing a lot when you're younger, and then you get to a certain level of skill, and that's actually what you need to produce the musical ideas that are kind of meaningful. I think. I don't know.
I agree, because I think the one thing about going through that Whittle stage. And it's not music that I don't really do guitar solos live, and it's not something
I've seen you do guitar solos.
I do that. I have to get away with it, but proper guitar, the proper Whittle. It's like I'm not sure how functional that is musically. I'm not sure. I love listening to Alan Holdsworth lead breaks, and I love listening to there's a few lead players I absolutely adore because it's compositional. But I can't listen to Frank Gambale because it's like, it just sounds like someone typing to me.
It's nuts.
Sorry. So is there another, just to tie things up, but new Thumpermonkey album, anything happening there? What's happening with Thumpermonkey?
I think certainly with the solo stuff, it was a process where I kind of just needed to kind of get an idea out. And literally, I had a lovely meeting with the boys just the other night. So just thinking about what we're going to do next. So, there's some ideas and there's some files kind of bouncing around, but I just think time has been tight for everyone. Obviously, Rail's full-time job is as a film music composer, which is reasonably busy. It's that thing of life, families, jobs. My work life has been absolutely crazy as well. So it's just finding a space where you can kind of all triangulate and do stuff again. But it feels like relatively soon we'll be able to crack on and do something new, and that would be very exciting.
In terms, how much rehearsal do you have to do for a Thumpermonkey gig as well? It sounds incredible.
Not enough.
It sounds really tight when you play live. But I always watch you guys and I just think, God, that sounds like they took so much time working that stuff out. It just sounds
a few. We live a bit further apart now, so whereas we used to be able to kind of pop in and do a regular evening things, now it's kind of more of a situation where we need to get together and just do a couple of really intense whole day things, which is far, it's doable. And I think since I've realised that I can just go, and I think the thing that's always caused me anxiety is being able to practice the vocals and get those up to speed. But actually, I can, with the belt box TM.
With the belt box, I'm going to have to.
Can we get an endorsement on the old belt box here? If we keep on mentioning it, maybe they'll throw us some free.
The algorithm will take us there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much are they?
I can't remember. I had to get it shopped in from America. It wasn't super cheap, but also not stupidly expensive. I don't know, 60, 70 quid or something like that. It's like a rubber thing that you can wash with a kind of a covering that slips around it. So obviously it gets a bit icky, so you can properly wash it all. But then with this kind of strap that goes around your head, very effective. Yeah, you can really sing at volume, and it has a significant decibel reduction, so you can kind of comfortably sing. Yeah.
So we'll wrap up. Records out August the 6th
on Believers Roast.
So is that Believers Roast Bandcamp and Believers Roast store?
Yeah, it's going to be. We're still figuring out how distribution is going to work. So, well, information will come up in due course. But I think really the best thing to do at the minute, if anyone's interested, is you can find me on Facebook /Michael Woodman Music, or on Twitter @Michael_Woodman. And I'm constantly putting up stuff saying there, I tend to try and stick stuff on my mailing list a week early. So, if you've heard Thumpermonkey stuff before and you're interested in what's coming out, get on the mailing list and you'll be the first to know about any exciting nuggets that I drop, I suppose.
Michael, send me a link for your email list and I'll send it out to our email list.
Fantastic. That'd be brilliant. So
I'll tell everyone so when this video goes live, I'll do it so that everyone can come across. I don't know how much you get from that, but it's worth a go, isn't it?
Absolutely.
No, thank you so much. It's always lovely talking to you.
It's been lovely. I've liked talking about economy picking and Frank Gambale, and yeah.
I think the video we did with Carvis, we got onto Vinnie Moore. So it was. I think I might try and do that with everybody we have on. Ask them their favourite Shatner album.
Or their favourite instructional video. Mine would be Melodic Control. No, Melodic Control by Marty Friedman, who I can still quite happily listen to his guitar solos on Rust. Rust in Peace, his pre-bends that he does. If ever I do any melodic stuff where he bends back, a semitone below into the note, that's all Marty Friedman. I won't hear a word said against Marty Friedman.
No, the lead. I mean, for lead playing, Rest in Peace is one of my favourite albums.
Lucretia has got a great solo on it. Fantastic solo. Yeah. And really some of the funniest Dave Mustaine vocal performances and lyrics as well. Wheel the Wyverns in. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, wouldn't change it.
But yeah, he's a great. It's probably the sort of end of Whittle. If 1990, you've got the perms are there, but Kurt Cobain's coming in the side. Whittle is ending. Perms are going. Funny shaped guitars and all this business and learning all your modes and all the modes of harmonic minor. That's going. Songwriting's coming in. Right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to switch you off. Thanks so much.
See you later.
And let's stop that.